For coming out today. My name is Hal Rowe. I'm with WHKY, 1290 AM, 102.3 FM. I'm the host of the WHKY radio program First Talk with Hal Rowe. Airs weekday morning 7 a.m. until 9 a.m. I hope that you'll join us one morning, either AM or FM, and we try to keep you plugged in with what's going on in the community. So hopefully you'll join us one morning and we'll be able to do that with you. I want to thank you very much for your time today, your gift of time. I know that time is valuable, and we're going to try not to waste it today. We have a lot to talk about, and this is your conversation that we have today. We're going to have a lot of folks up here on the panel who will talk with you and bring you some general information. But basically what we're here to do today is to educate the public, take a look at some perspectives. We want to address homelessness. We want to build awareness today. And as we go through today, I hope that you'll be asking yourself, what can I do to help? And how can we do this better? I think that all of us will agree we can do this better, and we'll talk about that today. You should have received one of these when you came in today. If not, raise your hand and someone will get one of these to you today. List all the different services available, and some of these will be talked about today. And I'll come back in just a moment as we continue on to bring you up to speed on exactly how we'll do this today. But first, I'd like to welcome and thank Dr. Frederick K. Witt, President of Lenore Ryan University, for kind enough to help us with the beautiful Grace Chapel today. And then, of course, the invocation from Pastor Andrew Wiesner. So they'll be up next, and we'll be back in just a moment. Dr. Witt.
Still signing some football players' house. So thank y'all for being here. Good afternoon. And welcome to Lenore Ryan University, and welcome to our beautiful Grace Chapel. It's our pleasure to have you with us on campus today and to be able to host this important topic of conversation and issue in our community. Not only is it a national issue, but it's also a local issue as well. So whether you're a pastor, whether you're a community leader, an elected official, volunteer, part of our Lenore Ryan community, again, we thank you for being here. You know, Lenore Ryan is kind of appropriate we're doing this. We're one of 26 ELCA affiliated universities in the United States. Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. There are only 3 in the South. And part of our ELCA belief and doctrine talks a lot about social justice and homelessness. In fact, we understand as a theology that housing is a fundamental right. And in the Bible, God says He heard the cries of the homeless, and that working for justice with and for homeless people is doing God's will and God's work in the world. A portion of the social messaging from ELCA, of which we're affiliated, is let the church pray for a renewal of commitment to walk more closely with and among people who are homeless in their daily strength, in sufferings, and in hope. A secure home is the foundation that enables people to build and to thrive. So as part of the community of Hickory and Catawba County, Lenore Ryan certainly seems fitting as part of the LCA to be hosting such a forum today. More importantly, the safety and the security of our campus is important. It's important in the Hickory and Catawba community and the well-being for all of our citizens. So we're glad you're here. Thank you for being here today. We're ready to be a part of this solution of this important issue in our community, and please come back and visit us. Part of my new administration is to be more engaged with the community in which we serve, and this is just one example of doing that. So thank all of you for being here today and giving of your time. I would like to bring to the podium our campus pastor, Andrew Wiesner, who will have a moment of prayer with us.
Let us pray. Almighty and gracious God, when we look at the Judeo-Christian scriptures, we see that you consider homes, having a place to call home, important. You promised a place to call home, a homeland to your people Israel when they had been released from oppression and slavery in Egypt. Once your people were in the promised land, you chose a place there in the city of Jerusalem where you could be worshiped in the beauty of holiness, a home where your beauty and glory could abide. In the New Testament, Gospel of Mark, there is a reference to Jesus himself having a house, a home. Thank you for this gathering here today. Thank you for placing on our hearts and minds a concern for those in our community who are without any home, without a safe home. May your spirit of compassion and creativity work among us in facts, presentations, discussions, and deliberations, that we may serve each other and the greater good of our community and society. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe. You have blessed us with the gift of life. Amen.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Wow, what a turnout. But I'm going to say just a few things. We at the Hickory Police Department, we did arrange this, but this is not our forum. It's your forum. It's all of our forums. I think as police, what we recognized is we found that a lot of times we get called and a lot of folks look to us maybe as the lead in the solution because we're out there and we're visible and we're out 24/7. But I'm going to sit down here in just a minute. But before I do that, I wanted to thank Emma Sellers for helping so much. She comes to our aid all the time. So I'd like to give Emma a round of applause for helping to organize this. And also Dr. Witt and all of the staff that are helping us here with the audio-visual and everything today at Lenore Ryan. We couldn't think of a better place anywhere around or in town or anywhere to host this today. Thank all of you for being here. Getting back to what I was saying, as police, we recognize and we learned early on that we are this much of the solution to such a complex issue. And so we're here today just like you to hear perspectives, to learn. We have a perspective and we're going to present that, but we want to hear everyone's perspective. And we hope that at the end of the day we all walk away knowing more about this topic, knowing how we can do it better, and building on that as a community. The answer lies in here. The answer lies in our community. And so I'm going to go sit down and turn it over to Howard.
Coming around that way. Again, thank you all very much for being here. We're going to kind of go over a little bit of how we're going to do this real quick, just so you'll kind of understand. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with about 8 to 10 minutes. It's listed right here with the different panelists. Panelists, I'll be sitting down up front right over here, and at about 8 minutes I will stand, so you'll know you're about 8 minutes in, and then you'll have about 2 minutes to wrap up, so that we can keep it to about 8 or 10 minutes. So like I said, I'll be right down here. You just relax, take your time, and they're going to be more of the informational part to start off with, so you can get some information from the different viewpoints from the folks who are up here today. Then we're going to take a little break, let everybody get a little sip of water, take just a moment, and then we're going to take this microphone and we're going to put it down here in the middle aisle and the floor. And you'll have a chance to come up to that microphone. We'll form a line right down the center of the chapel, and you will have your opportunity to address the panel, and you are welcome to make comments. You're welcome to ask questions. We will limit that to 2 minutes to make sure that everybody has a chance to share. And then about 4:30, we'll wrap up and go over some key points that we've discussed today. So again, you will have a chance to make those comments. We want your voice to be heard, whether questions, comments, solutions, but be thinking about trying to keep that within a 2-minute time frame, again, just so everybody will have a chance to share. They say, sometimes guests need no introduction. I'd say most of the people up here at the table you're going to know today, but let's go ahead and let you know who they are. First of all, just kind of raise your hand, I think, just to let everyone know. Tina Willis, Housing Manager with Partners Behavioral Health. She'll bring a unique view to us. Tommy Luckadoo, Adams Commercial Real Estate Services. Mr. Luckadoo, we thank you for being here. Rod Setliff, Business Manager for the Salvation Army. Of course, Mr. Sutliff is here today representing the Salvation Army and some other folks who I've seen here as well in our audience. So you might want to get them during the break, shake a hand and ask them a question. Of course, Chief Thurman Wisnett, Chief of the Hickory Police Department. Judge Buford Cherry, Chief District Court, 25th District, joins us as well today. The Reverend Reggie Longcrier, Executive Director, Exodus Homes. And then at the very end of the table, Jenny Connor, Executive Director of the Catawba County United Way. Again, the first part of this meeting today will be more educational. You'll get some information and some different viewpoints. Please, when we take the break, make yourself available to stay around. We do want you to make your voice heard. That's a big, big part of what we're doing here today. So without further ado, please welcome to the podium Tina Willis, Housing Manager, Partners Behavioral Health. Ms. Willis. Right there, wherever you're comfortable.
If you guys can hear me. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Thank you, and I appreciate all of you being here, and I appreciate Chief Thurman letting me be on the panel and speak to you guys. I come from Partners Behavioral Health Management. I'm the housing manager there. My part in being here is I'm a part of the Housing Visions Continuum of Care, and some of the information that I give you today will be as part of my membership in the Housing Visions Continuum of Care and just being around for a very long time. So I want to first start out and talk about Housing Visions and who that is, and it's open to anyone. Housing Visions is a group of organizations, agencies, individuals that meet on a regular basis. We meet monthly. It's the second Thursday of each month at 12 noon at the Catawba County United Way. And I say that one because that gives you an opportunity to, if you hear some things that you're interested in today, you can come and share and find out more during those meetings, as well as this is the basis of where a lot of my information comes from, is from this group and the activities that this group does. Each year, one of the major activities that we do is a point-in-time homeless count. And so I want to share with you some information about what that is and what our numbers are. The point-in-time count, one, is a requirement by the federal government for us to be able to receive funding into our community. We have to conduct a point-in-time count. What that does is it identifies how many homeless folks we have in our communities. It tells what their situations are. We have a survey that we complete that we try to gather as much information as possible. It also is a way for us to gather our housing inventory count. So what's our availability of beds to help homeless folks in our community? How many emergency shelter, transitional housing program beds do we have? And how many do we lack, or are those beds functional? Are people able to get in those with few barriers, or do we need more? And so all of that happens during that point in time count. That usually happens the last week in January. HUD mandates that time period. So we just recently completed our point in time count for our area. And I want to share with you some of the numbers that we have. Our total number that we had, that we counted as homeless, was 310. And so I want to tell you just a little bit of what that means. That 310 number, HUD tells us that we cannot include those folks who are doubled up. So if I lose my housing and Tom lets me come and stay with him, then I'm not considered homeless, according to HUD's definition. So for our purposes, for our point in time count, and these 310 individuals that we counted were in emergency shelter or transitional housing programs specifically for homeless individuals. If I'm in a treatment center like the Flynn home, or if I'm in the hospital or the jail and I was homeless before I went in, but on that night I'm in the hospital or jail or some kind of treatment facility, I am not counted as homeless. I am considered sheltered, so those folks do not count as well. So just to give you a concept of what these numbers mean and who they entail and who they don't, because for some people it may seem high, some people it may seem low, but I just want to clarify what the definition is according to what we count as homeless for these purposes, for these numbers. So the 310 that we have, of those, 50 individuals were counted as unsheltered, meaning they were staying in a tent a vehicle, an abandoned building, someplace not meant for human habitation. So 50 of those individuals that we counted fit that category. We had some of the subpopulations of those. We had 8 people that we were able to count as chronically homeless. And in chronically homeless means that they were homeless for 1 year or more, or they had 4 or more episodes over a 3-year period that add up to a year. So I'm trying to give you definitions as I tell you some of the statistics to help draw that picture better. We had 23 people that self-admitted to having a serious mental illness. That means they told us themselves. That meant that we didn't speculate that they were having hallucinations, delusions, or whatever during our conversations with them. They admitted to having a mental illness and were in treatment. We had 23 people that also admitted to substance use disorders. Again, that meant if they smelled of alcohol or we suspected that they were high, we didn't necessarily count them unless they told us that they were high or under some influence. 15 of those 50 that were identified as unsheltered admitted to both mental health and substance use disorder, both. We had 23 admitted to being in a domestic violence situation, and of those, there were 12 that had mental health, substance use disorder, and domestic violence combination. So I tell you these because these are subpopulations of the folks that are dealing with issues on the streets, that are homeless, and these are some of the barriers that keep them from being able to move forward out of homelessness. So we had 8 veterans that identified themselves as veterans, and that's out of the 50, all these numbers are out of that 50 that were considered unsheltered. I don't have the statistics yet for the folks that were in emergency shelter or transitional housing programs as far as the breakdowns and the populations, but we hope to have that soon and we'll be able to distribute that or publish that in some way. We also ask the school systems to identify some of the individuals that they have that are coming to school when they're living in homeless situations. The numbers for the school system are a little bit different because they do count those folks that are doubled up. And we don't have those totals for 2018, but for 2017 in Catawba County, there were 115 people that were either doubled up or living in shelters or hotels or unaccompanied youth. And then Hickory City Schools reported 56 last year, and this was at the date of our point in time count. So this was in January of 2017. So that would have been for basically half the school year. Just give you some perspective on that. Some of the resources that we have in the community, just want to share some of those. These numbers come from some of those resources. We have 5 transitional housing programs for individuals that are homeless, and we have 3 emergency shelters that are available that we pulled this information from. And so we really want to focus on those emergency shelters and transitional housing programs and push people towards those programs where they can get assistance and shelter. Most of all those programs also have components of case management with them to be able to help folks move from one place to the other, out of their homelessness into transitional or emergency shelter, and then on to permanent housing. I think that's the majority of the information that I just wanted to share. I just wanted to put out first just some numbers for you so you have some information about that. And with the point in time count, just to say one more thing, the point in time count is just that, it's a snapshot. So if we go to a family reunion and we take a picture of everybody that's there, we notice sometimes that Aunt Sue's not there, Uncle George isn't there, so we know that there may be people that are missing from these numbers. But we feel like that this is a pretty good representation, and the way that we do our point in time count, we've really perfected that over a time period. During the count, we set up several stations. This year we had a station at the Hickory Soup Kitchen, the Corner Table Soup Kitchen in Newton. We had at Lifehouse Day Shelter and Grace House Day Shelter. So we went to where people were to try to gather this information. We also tried to do some advertisement through those folks that are homeless to let folks know, hey, we're going to be doing this. They know that when they come, they're not going to be arrested for warrants or anything like that. We're just getting information. Once they fill out that survey, then they can't be identified from the information that they gave once they walk away. So hopefully that will give you just a little bit of perspective about our numbers and some of the things that we're doing.
All right, can you hear me? Very good. I've spoken to many of you over the last couple of years about this issue, and I think every one of you has heard me say, there but for the grace of God, go I. There are any number of curveballs life could have thrown us that could have put any one of us in a homeless situation. Addiction, mental illness, family crisis, financial crisis, a health crisis. But I also believe that even in times of crisis, there are very basic standards of human behavior that our fellow man can expect of us. I am beyond honored to share this podium with Dr. Longcrier. I have long been an admirer of him and Exodus Homes, and I've seen their work over the course of a quarter of a century. I think they are successful, because they set standards of behavior for their clients and hold them accountable when they fall short. Lovingly accountable, but still accountable. I know that some of the ministries that work with the homeless in this town also have standards of behavior like Salvation Army. But unfortunately, those standards do not exist in the woods with our urban campers. There's no leadership. There's nobody to hold them accountable other than a police car. And by then, it's often too late. Let me be more specific. I'm going to ask in a moment Chief to put some pictures up. I've spoken with several business people here this morning, or today when I came in, and they've described various law enforcement issues they have had with urban campers. The problem stemming from homelessness that most affects my business is trash, garbage. And I don't mean a random copper bottle on the side of the road. I mean dumpster loads full of trash visible from the street. It is my great honor to be the co-owner and manager of the Westover Business Park on Tate Boulevard. We've got about 49 small businesses there, all of whom work hard to support their families and bring jobs to Hickory. Chief, you could bring up some photos here. And it gets worse. This is what their employees and their customers see every day as they come and go their place of business. I took these photos I took some, and I think HPD took some about 10 days ago along 3rd Avenue Southeast. That's the corridor that runs through Westover from Tate to LR. The photos I took were all within about 150 yards of Westover. It's not right, it's not fair, but it's what we get when we tolerate bad behavior. We can be compassionate, but still have standards. I refer back to Exodus Homes. What is also not fair is the large cost that's going to be incurred by the landowners to have this mess cleaned up. And you're not just talking about sending some folks out with trash bags. You've got some biological hazards out here, including needles. It's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars that they're going to have to pay to clean up. It's happened before, and it'll happen again unless we come together and do something about it. As property owners, it is indeed our responsibility to maintain our property. I pay about $4,000 a year just to have the random cup and bottle picked up off our property. But when it gets to this point, this is vandalism. I hate to use that word, but that's what it is. And as much compassion as this city and its people have, we cannot tolerate vandalism. One other thought that crosses my mind every day when I drive up and down 3rd Avenue. I imagine Scott Millar from the Economic Development Corporation driving through Hickory with a prospect who's interested in bringing their company and their jobs to Hickory. And I wonder what the reaction of that prospect, who may be on his or her first visit to Hickory, would be when they see this. As I've told many of you also, I'm willing to be part of the solution. I want to be part of the solution. I just don't know what it is. I'm looking forward to the other comments today and the questions and comments you may have. Thank you.
It's homelessness. It's been something that people have faced for a long time. Over 3,000 years ago, God told the Israelites, as they were preparing to enter the Promised Land, that there will never cease to be some in need. I therefore command you to open your hand to the poor and needy neighbor in your land. We're always going to have homelessness. What our challenge is how do we handle it? And what I want to do during the next several minutes is explain how the Salvation Army approaches homelessness. My name is Rob Setliff, and I'm the business manager at the Hickory Regional Coordinate. As Hal said, we have other representatives from the Army here. Casey McCall's Director of Shelter Services. Steve Aaron's our Resource Development Director. And all three of us are very, very involved in the homeless situation that we deal with there at the Army, especially Casey. Casey deals with it every day of the week, or really, even 7 days a week. But anyway, in 1865, a young Methodist minister in London by the name of William Booth took a year off from church, from his church duties, to go into the streets and take up this call to minister to the poor, the homeless, the hungry, and the destitute. And thus the Salvation Army was born. And that's in 1865. What he learned during this year was that homelessness is a spiritual issue. We try to blame it on many things, but he learned that the absence of God in people's lives was the underlying cause. Thus he based his ministry on seeking the poor, needy, and homeless people of the community and helping them in the name of Jesus Christ in hope that they would come to have a relationship with Him. That continues to be the foundation of our ministry today. The Salvation Army came to the United States in 1880, 15 years after it was started in England. It came to Hickory in 1925. That probably surprises a lot of you guys. The Salvation Army's been here for 93 years, and that's when the ministry to the homeless and the destitute and the poor started. We established our first homeless shelter in Hickory in 1956, and I've talked to one guy that was around back then, and it was mainly a transient home, people stopping over for a night or two. Police would bring drunks there to sober up, that kind of thing. It's progressed now to something quite different. Our present homeless shelter, it's called the Shelter of Hope, has been there for 18 years, since 2000. So we don't profess to know everything about homeless or to be perfect in our ministry. In fact, we're very far from being perfect in the ministry. But we've been doing it a long time and we've learned a lot. Last year, we served 591 unduplicated people. 591 is a typical number for us, plus or minus several. It's been very consistent for the last 5 years. Of that number, approximately 40% of those people, that 591 people, found permanent housing when they left. 350 were male, 188 were female, 53 were children under the age of 18. 413 were white, 160 were black. Very, very few other races. I think there were 7 Asians, and what's surprising to me is there were no Hispanics. And if you look at our census, last census, the Hispanics were the second largest race group in Catawba County at 9.5%. So there were no Hispanics in the shelter at all last year. The largest age group is 45 to 54, followed by 35 to 44, and third is 25 to 34. So you've got the range from 25 to 54 in there. There were 25 children under the age of 5, and 33 were over the age of 62. Our shelter consists of 2 floors, with the top floor housing women and children, and the bottom floor housing men. We have a capacity of 84 people living in, we have 2 types of rooms, dorm style living, and then rooms that will house up to 6 people. Last year we had an average daily occupancy of 59. Last month we were at 70. We have washing machines and dryers that the people can wash and dry their clothes. And we also have a commercial style kitchen that we cook and serve 2 meals a day, 365 days a year. We serve breakfast and we serve dinner. At each of the meals we have 2 seatings. We have the first seating is for residents, and the second seating is for anybody that would walk in off the streets. No questions asked. Last year we served 45,316 meals. 42% of those were non-residents. In other words, 42% of that number were people who just walked in off the streets. One thing that we really want the community to understand, and it's misunderstood, is that we're an emergency shelter. In other words, it is not intended to house clients for extended periods of time. Many of our residents have lost their jobs, or gotten evicted from their home, or have faced some other life-changing problem, and they need temporary help with food, shelter, and clothing. And that's what we're there for, to serve those people. We allow clients to stay for 90 days. Last year, out of the 591 clients that we had, 464 left inside of 60 days. So they got on with it. They got out in less than 60 days. And that's about 80%. If a client is working faithfully towards coming out of homelessness and needs more time, we work with them and let them stay longer. 10% of our clients stayed beyond the 90 days. So we're really, Casey and his staff, they're really bent over backwards to help somebody if they're working towards getting out of homelessness, if they're working with the program and trying. A typical check-in goes like this. If somebody wants to check in the shelter, they check in after 3:30 in the afternoon. We do a client intake, which is we go over all their information, go over our rules, we drug test them, we give them a breathalyzer, and then we check to see if they're on the sex offenders list, and then we assign them a bed. So in order to check in the shelter, you've got to be drug-free, you've got to be alcohol-free, and you cannot be on the sex offenders list, and that's of course because we have children there. Residents must leave the shelter every morning at 9 o'clock, and they can return at 3:30 in the afternoon, and that's intended to get the residents out, looking for jobs, having sessions with some of our partners and that type of thing. They must be back in the shelter by 10 o'clock every night, and when they come in, we give everybody a breathalyzer test upon return to make sure that they haven't been drinking. We do random drug testing. When the temperature is 32 degrees or below, we open up the shelter at 10 o'clock to let anyone sleep on cots in the dining room. Many of our staff have come out of our shelter. In other words, they've made it out of homelessness. We also have staff in other areas of the ministry that have come through the shelter. They all agree. I've talked with all of them, and they all agree that structure and discipline are the most important things that we give to the clients at our shelter. That's what they need. We have a full-time caseworker on staff to meet with the clients on a regular basis, and she works with them daily, weekly, and monthly, depending on the need. Typically, the biggest issues they face are mental health issues. Just some of the things that we offer the residents: all shelter-aged children are required to attend the Boys and Girls Club after-school program. During summer, they're required to attend the summer school program. All that's free. Our sanctuary is beside the shelter. We have services Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and Wednesday evening, and many of our shelter residents attend the services. We provide employment for the residents during November and December. You probably don't realize most of the bell ringers that we use during the Christmas season are living in the shelter or people living in tents. Last year, this past season, we hired about 120 people. We have an 11-bed transitional house on our campus. We have 2 ARCs in our district, adult rehabilitation centers, where people can self-check themselves in for alcohol and drug dependency. The men's is located in Charlotte. The women's is located in Memphis, Tennessee, and we supply them with transportation to get there. Lastly, I guess I want to thank everybody. We could not operate this shelter without you guys. It's really your shelter. Without your donations, we couldn't do it. We're funded by the United Way and you guys. So thank you very much for that.
All right, thank you, Rob. First of all, as a police, we have a unique perspective. I think our perspective would be somewhere in the middle. And I say that because, just here, working closely, we work very closely with everybody that you see at the table, and many of you that I see out in the audience, we work daily with. It is a tough issue. We deal with a lot of the things on a daily basis that are what I would call byproducts of homelessness. We deal with panhandling, we deal with issues like Tommy described with trespassing, and then it kind of, down the road comes back around and we have code enforcement. So our code enforcement officers are involved with those kind of cases. And so we put a lot of time and a lot of thought, put a lot of efforts into researching this issue. And actually, we charge a lot of folks with things like aggressive panhandling, with trespassing, and we saw that, that's not necessarily solving the problem. So that's part of the reason that we wanted to kind of get everybody here today to see what we can do better as a community. We also see some other things from our perspective is we get a lot of questions from folks, and a lot of the questions we get tells us that I think that our community wants to help. We have a very generous, very giving community, but there's a lot of misunderstanding that we see in our community. One of the things that we hear a lot is, we need more services for homelessness, or we need more services for this. And so we did a little project last year, and I don't think we've even included all the services, but each one of you got a flyer today. And, just to show of hands, how many of you knew that there were this many services in the Hickory area for homelessness? So some did. We find that a lot of folks don't know that there are this many services. We find that a lot of our folks who are in need of services, don't know where to go or don't know where to start. And so all of our officers have these, have started carrying these within the last few years. And, when we find somebody that needs to get connected to services, this is what we're giving. I'll tell a couple of stories here in just a minute, a story of kind of what we hear that is not necessarily working, and then I'm going to tell you a success story of what the difference is when we work through our nonprofit organizations and our agency, other agencies that are in essence the experts on how to get folks connected into those services and kind of what a difference that can make, rather than just maybe giving directly to somebody on the street. And that's really what you're going to hear from me today. From our perspective at the police department, is one of the most important things that we see. If you really want to make a difference, we see a lot of well-intended efforts that go on in our community, but it's not always connecting folks to services. And so, one of the things that we say a lot is our goal should be to help folks out of homelessness, not to help somebody to be homeless another day. And that's kind of what our goal and our mission is, and one of the reasons that we wanted to kind of get everybody together today to get that information out, because we find a lot of folks just don't know that these services exist. Also, and I'm sure Jenny's going to talk a lot about the 211 service, and we'll show a quick little video here shortly. So one of the calls that we got here recently, and we get these kind of calls, is Captain Young over here actually got a call around Thanksgiving from somebody who was well-intended, who said, hey, would you provide a police escort to go out to take our youth group out into a tent encampment to give frozen turkeys at Thanksgiving. And it's well-intended, but again, that's just, there's a whole lot of issues, they're frozen turkeys. What is that? Is that really connecting folks to services? Is that helping the problem, or is that making the problem worse? I'm going to tell you a success story now of what it means, and sometimes folks get connected to services in all various ways, but this is a true story that happened about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I didn't know about it until I got a letter from this gentleman. And so I got a letter from this gentleman, and his story goes something like this. There was a gentleman who came in to the police department about 3 o'clock in the morning one morning, and he was carrying a backpack and wanted to see a police officer. And one of our officers, one of our sergeants came up, actually was the sergeant that serves on the board at Exodus. And so he had been through the crisis intervention training like many of our officers have, and he knew about some of the services. And this gentleman actually had a note, and the note, to paraphrase, this gentleman was going to assault a police officer because he had no place to go, and at least if he went to jail, he would have a meal and a warm place to stay. After talking to our officer, he kind of confessed to that and said, you're a nice guy, I can't bring myself to do it. So we were able to get this gentleman connected, made a few phone calls. We got this gentleman connected. I think he ended up being a bell ringer with the Salvation Army for a while. Eventually transitioned, I think was at Exodus for a while, if I remember right. And long story short is that during the Christmas season, when he was ringing the bell, impressed a manager of the store he was in front of so much that was offered a full-time job. And where did I come in? The letter was several months down the road, and the letter was a thank you letter to thank the officer who intervened and got him connected, and also to the Salvation Army and to Exodus Homes. And the key to that is, although it was a strange way to get connected to services, he got connected to folks that knew what to direct him and got help. The challenge that we face as police that we see is if folks hand money out of the window. I know it feels great, I've done it myself, but if you drive up and someone's panhandling and you hand $20 out the window, we all feel great about that, but that person is not getting connected to services. And it's encouraging that person to stand out there the next day and the next day. If we're doing charity where we're taking things directly to folks and giving directly to these folks, they're not getting connected to the services that they need. And while we're, a great community that wants to help, what we see from our perspective at the police department is that we need to coordinate our efforts as a community. So if you or your church, what we would say to you, if you truly want to help, then sometimes the not so easy thing to do is to say no at that point. But also get to know some of the organizations in this flyer. Get to know some of these organizations, volunteer at these organizations, or direct your efforts to these folks, because they are going to get to know the folks, see what maybe is driving the homelessness, and we're going to try to get these folks connected to services. There is, as Tommy said, we should all be concerned about economic development. And I think as a community, what we would like to see is we'd like to see more of a coordinated effort to where we're helping, we're doing it in the right way, a productive way that's mutually beneficial to helping those in need, and also considering our need to grow our city and our economic development. So that's what we would like to see, kind of from the 3 o'clock in the morning ground level at the police department. I think if, we may not all agree on what the right or wrong way to help is, but I hope we can all agree that we don't want to see folks living in the woods. We don't want to see folks panhandling. And I just think that I would like to see us as a community do that. So can I cue the video real quick? So we did a video that we're going to be releasing that kind of is a shorter version of the message that I just gave you. Have you ever been tempted to give money to a panhandler? Do you wonder what the money will be used for? And how can you ensure that your charity isn't wasted?
One way to ensure that the money you give is put to good use is by giving directly to the many organizations in our community. By supporting these local organizations, you are providing real opportunities for food, shelter, and services for those truly in need.
When you give directly to someone on the street, you may be encouraging potentially self-destructive behavior that allows for continued homelessness. When someone approaches you asking for money, just say no and direct them to the services that they need.
In North Carolina, there is a resource directory. If you would invite these individuals to call the 3-digit phone number 211, which is available 24 hours, 7 days a week, they will be assisted by a live operator, which will help them find multiple resources in their community.
Rather than giving directly to someone on the street, consider giving your contribution to a local charity to help make a real impact and help change lives for good. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Burford Cherry. I'm the Chief District Court Judge for the 25th Judicial District and represent the other 8 judges that serve Burke, Cobb, and Caldwell County. I live in Hickory and have been residing in Hickory since 1982, and the homeless situation has become increasingly worse since I moved here. I sought my law practice for 18 years, and I've seen it for the last 17 years sitting on the bench. And I'd like to echo what Chief Witness talked about, some of the causes of what happens with homeless folks and what I think some of the solutions are not. And one of the solutions that's not is putting people in jail because of their homeless condition. Unfortunately, homeless folks do engage in criminal offenses. There's no question about that. However, national studies have shown about 1/5 of those folks commit a crime solely for the purpose of going to jail so that they have a place to stay. And there are a number of other folks, and I would suggest the figures are probably higher when, in my experience in drug court, when you first bring somebody into a drug court, they don't even want to admit they have a drug problem or substance abuse issue. And I would say the same applies to folks with mental health issues. When you ask someone if you have a mental health issue, the majority of them will say, absolutely not, I don't. But further investigation will find that a number of homeless folks, a number of folks that are in the court system in various degrees, do have serious substance abuse and mental health issues. And their mental health issues are often treated by self-medicating on illegal drugs or prescription drugs. And we find them in court. And by the time that I see them, they've usually served enough time to where there's very little we can do to help them get the services they need, because most of the time they commit what's called a Class 3 offense. The maximum term of imprisonment in North Carolina for a Class 3 offense is 20 days. Most of these folks have already been in jail 15, 20, 30, or more days before they come to court, and there's very little that we can do. You can't put them on probation. You can't put somebody on probation that's already served their offense. It's very difficult to put somebody on probation that has no place to live. One of the criteria for being on probation is you have to have a residence. Somewhere the probation officer can come and check up on you. Well, a tent, or what you have seen here, certainly does not qualify for that. Probation discourages us from putting these folks on probation that don't have suitable residence. We also see homelessness in other types of court settings. I do juvenile court in all 3 counties and deal with abuse, neglect, and dependency cases where a number of families are homeless. They live in their car, they live in a tent, they live in a camper out on somebody's property, and they come into court because of a Child Protective Services complaint. And a lot of them have to deal with the fact that they do not have a residence. So social services steps in, files a petition, and these parents and their children find themselves in a court setting. Now, social services does a great job of developing case plans for parents and help for their children that require a number of different things, one of which is to obtain a residence. However, if you are a parent who has a serious substance abuse issue and or mental health problem, we can develop all the case plans in the world, but as I tell parents every day, I need you to prioritize what you are doing. And that priority in most of their cases needs to be to deal with their mental health or their substance abuse issue, because until you get that under control, they're not capable of doing these other things, including finding residence. This is a very, very difficult issue, a multifaceted issue, and it's one that will require all of us working together. Law enforcement by itself is not the answer. The court system by itself is not the answer. It takes a collaborative process for all of these agencies and individuals to work together to try to solve the problem of homelessness and all the problems that are attendant as a result of that. My wife teaches first grade. It's horrible to think, but it's true. There are a number of first graders over the years that she has had as students who were living in their car at the time, or living in a camper, or living in a tent. That's not conducive to someone getting an education that will lead to a job. I could sit up here and talk for another hour or so, but I'm going to save that and I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Longfire, who I also admire for what he's done. He has helped a lot of people that come into the court system, believe me.
Well, I'm one person that they asked the preacher to come up and say something. I gave him time limit, but I'm one who subscribes to the Beatitudes. I'm one who subscribes to the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who are brief, for they shall be invited again. So I'm going to try to be brief. My name is Reggie Longcry. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Exodus Homes, which is a faith-based supportive housing program for returning citizens coming from jails, detoxes, prisons who were homeless. Researchers say that 25 to 50% of our homeless population have a history of incarceration. An even greater number have a history of substance abuse. Almost 30 years, I've been a prison chaplain, about 30 years now. And one of the same prisons I had served time in, now I have the keys to the gate. And seeing inmates leave the prison where the state's only contribution to a man or woman's rehabilitation, should they not have any place to go upon their release, is a gate check for not more than $45, whether or not they have a place to go or not. And many of these women and men have literally burned their bridges behind them. No place to go, no job to come to, no family members to receive them. And having seen inmates leave, one incident, one year I saw an inmate leave, and he did all the right things, he applied himself during his incarceration. And upon his release, he didn't want to go back to the same household that he came out. His mother and father both sold drugs, and his brothers sold drugs. He didn't want to go back there. And he got to the bus station over here, and he thought about it for a while after they had dropped him off. And before dusk dark, they caught him trying to climb over the side fence, trying to get back into the prison because he had no place to go. He was homeless. 2 weeks later, the Lincolnton police had called the institution and said, "We have a fellow over here named John Jones, and he says that he escaped from your prison." He had no place to go. He was homeless. Then there was another incident. A fellow left. He said, "Reverend, they know I don't have any place to stay." He'd been sleeping in tents under the bridge. And it was wintertime. He was used to going in and come out when the weather was warm. But this time, they let him out. It was cold. Snow on the ground. He went to his community and went to a department store, pick up the sweater really good until the store clerk could witness him pick up the sweater, put it up underneath his jacket, walked out. Surely security would be right behind him. Once he got out, said nobody came. So what he did, he walked across the street, picked up a rock, and hurled it to the window, and stood there and waited until the police could come so that he could go back to jail because he was homeless. So this is one of the reasons that Exodus Homes exists, with faith-based supportive housing program for recovering alcoholics and addicts and returning citizens. And some years ago when we first started out, people were frightful, people were fearful about what kind of people we would have. What about our children? But we have a criteria, we have a application that's filled out. People just don't walk in off the street and come into Exodus Homes. We're very selective about who we choose to come in. You know, some people say, "Well, I'm thinking about coming to your brother." We're thinking about accepting you. You know, that's what you got to know. So when a person is released from the prison and literally burn all the bridges behind them, upon incarceration, many of them have been homeless prior to being arrested, going to jail. And then if they have not been homeless, many of them come out having the family having been disrupted, bridges burnt behind them. They have a loss of jobs and what have you. So they've got to start from scratch, and many have come out with just all their worldly possessions in a brown paper bag and no place to go, nothing to do. This is why we exist. So we bring people into the prison program. And it's no cakewalk, it's a structured program. It's not prison, but it's structure. We carry them to NA meetings, AA meetings. There's ex-offenders anonymous twice a week. Come to church on Sunday. Drinking and drugging is zero tolerance. One time, you're out the door. And so once they're there, we encourage them to go back to school, receive their GEDs, college diplomas, vocational training. Some have taken courses driving trucks or going over to CBCC, going back to school. We encourage them to do other things, reunite with family members, their children, and what have you. One woman was living in a crack house and ran a crack house for some years here. years ago, and crack house caught fire. And before the flames had smoldered good, she was back in her child, 7 years old, back in the crack house, living there again, with a grandmother there. Finally, the crack house caught fire again. Little boy out in the cold, the mama's out, the grandmother's out, and an agency, I don't know whether it was Tina or one of these agents, said, brought the lady to us and said, would you take one of these folks? So we took the mother and the child, little boy 7 years old, and we were able to bring them into the program, get them employment. She was able to get a work and ride vehicle, to take him back and forth to school, go back and forth to work. And today, some years back, I watched her walk across the stage of CVCC and get her associate's degree. I watched her years ago be able to go into a Habitat house. She's game for the employee. She works back in our program. And the son is a supervisor on his job, having been homeless, but having came to a place that had structure. Now, one other thing I want to make, and Chief, we're in the Ridgeview community, was in the area in which the housing, our main complex, was once the hotbed of drugs, prostitution, gambling, killings, and many times the police would not come up in there, and they could attest to this, except they'd be 10 strong sometimes. Folks had been hurt up in there. They had to shut it down. The landlord had been pegged as a slum landlord. When we were able to take it over, toilets and tubs were strewn in the parking lot. The community was literally held hostage. Elderly folk couldn't sit out on the front porch, water the lawn, planting flowers. Drug dealers, they commandeered 3 streets. They could look up 3 streets and see the police coming. The woman that lived next door was a retired school teacher. She could remember getting up at night and going to the restroom and bullets coming to her window, barely missing her. We were able to turn that community around. Chief Lucas came up with PACT, Police and Community Together. And we worked hand in hand. Chief, well, he was a rookie then, but we worked hand in hand together and was able to clean that neighborhood up. And he can tell you about the crime we haven't gone out, just for us having been in there. Thank you.
And they asked me to follow this minister. It was about 17 years ago when I became the director of Catawba County United Way that this agency came to us and asked for funding. And I remember somebody saying, this might be the end of your career, because they were afraid that the public would not want to fund this type of individual and this type of service. So I think for those of you here today to say thank you to all of these organizations who work so tirelessly with these clients. If you would join me in a round of applause. I was talking with Chief Wisnett recently, and he said something about the homeless, and I said, well, you know, I sort of wear 2 hats. I was approached while taking care of some of my great aunt's resources that there were homeless folks on her property and that she would need to pay for this cleanup. This was a lady in her 90s, and she was being asked to clean up property off of Lenore Ryan Boulevard. And I said, I couldn't see anything. He said, well, if you walk in, you'll see a pile of trash about the size of a Volkswagen. And at that point, I realized it was torn, because here I was, I served these individuals as the director of United Way. And however, I know the programs we have out there and the resources. So that's sort of what I'd like to share this morning, because I am in a unique position. In Catawba County, we have a strong working relationship at United Way with the nonprofits, the government, and the for-profit companies, the businesses. These nonprofits are important players to our economic growth, and I've been singing this song lately. I just talked with Lindsay from the chamber. I think that's something that we all ought to remember. These nonprofits are working with the most vulnerable population in our community, the ones that will fall off and fall over the edge. They will be the ones we'll see in those camps and in those homeless or in the shelters. These are the people we want to lift up, the ones that we want to help overcome the hardships and be self-sufficient. At United Way, I think the chief mentioned the 211 resource. We've been working on this for years so that we would have a database with resources so that anyone could pick it up. This 3-digit phone number 211 is a national known number and is becoming more known as we have seen that it's picked up in many more communities. It now covers the entire state of North Carolina. So you can dial 211 and you can have a live operator 24/7, and you can tell her on behalf of someone in your family, yourself, or a homeless person what they need, and they will try to help you with resources that are in your community. I have had people call me, and I'll tell them to call 211, and they'll say, now, hold on a minute, I need to get a piece of paper. What is that number again? But we do know that this was something that we in our community knew that we had resources, but helping drive those people to those resources was difficult because, just as the chief said, so many people don't know the wonderful resources that we have. When getting people to a credible, well-networked agency, we know that agency can assess the need and look within our community toolbox of resources. For example, someone may need rent assistance to keep them from being evicted and becoming homeless, and they may call that number. That person will refer them to resources, but that resource may not have that particular resource that month. They may be out of mortgage assistance, rent assistance, but they can do a little triage. They can talk with them and say, well, talk with me, or will you come in and let's talk about your situation. It might be that they can encourage them to look within, if they have children, assistance with childcare. Or they may be able to say, hey, we have a nonprofit in the community that could assist you with medical needs. This is the importance of having the nonprofits, the reputable nonprofits that know and can encourage and help talk with these citizens and help them see where those resources are, because they don't know what's out there either. They just know, I'm going to be evicted, but they don't know that there are other resources that they might be able to bring into their toolbox so that they can be successful and stay in their homes and keep them from being in a tent in our community. We have resources in our community because we have thriving businesses. And we have employees working in these businesses, and these are the people that are supporting the resources. If we lose businesses, we eventually lose resources that are available to assist our families. It goes hand in hand, and I've said this and you'll hear me say it. We must find a balance in our community. Catawba County, we must attract those companies by showcasing our community as a vibrant and desirable place to live and raise a family. A place where we take care of our most vulnerable population. I feel strongly that we must be involved. However, we must be mindful in the approach we take. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our panel. Thank you very much. Really good information there. Okay, now we hope that you'll stay around for the second half, because what we're going to do next is we're going to move the microphone down here onto the floor. And it's going to be about this first row here, and you'll have your chance to comment, to ask questions of our panel members. Right now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be back in about 15 minutes. I do want to let you know, the college has asked me to let you know there are restrooms at the front of the building and back here in the back as well. So a short break, about 15 minutes. We'll be back. We'll take your questions, your comments for the panel. Each of you will have about 2 minutes, and then we'll wrap up with comments to wrap up. Thank you all so much for being here. See you back here in 15 minutes. Thank you. Questions will line up right down this way. We do have some additional chairs and some additional seating off to the side. So if you want to, just as you're waiting your turn, as you come up. Now, one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. That everybody who wants to be heard can be heard today. That's one of the main things that we want to make sure that you do. So if you are not in line right now, you see somebody in there, please come up. We would ask that you limit your questions and your comment time to 2 minutes. If you would, please, 2 minutes for your questions, your comments. But we want to make sure that everybody has a chance. That's why we're here today. We may have an idea from you that's a great solution or a great idea. These folks up here want to hear it, and the folks in the audience want to hear it as well. So please make good use of this time. That's what this forum is about, is to have you come up, share your ideas, your comments. And everything is wide open. Please, whatever you want to say, keep it clean. Please, no profanity. That's the only thing we ask. But other than that, we want to hear from you. So with that said, Dr. Van Ness, you'd be kind enough to start us off.
Thank you, Hal. And first of all, thank you for this forum. This is wonderful. I am the chairperson of the Foothills Veterans Stand Down and the co-chair of the Foothills Veterans Helping Veterans. And I wanted this panel and the audience to be aware that we exist. Now, I do want to thank Chief. You got us in the brochure under other, and we thank you for that. But I have a feeling a lot of people don't even know what we do. And our job primarily is to help homeless and needy veterans get reconnected back into life. We want to get them out of the woods. We want to connect them to services such as housing so we can get them out of the woods. Jobs, so they can be self-sufficient. We work with Greenway Transportation so that if people do have jobs and don't have transportation, we can get them to the job. We provide medical help, dental help, and again, connecting to a great deal of services. And just wanted people to be aware of that. In case you have a veteran or somebody you know who might need some help, you can come visit and see what we do. Every Friday morning at 10 o'clock at the Hickory Soup Kitchen, we meet. And everyone here is invited just to see how we help our veterans and how we connect them back into life. And you don't have to be a veteran to come. Veterans have the veterans, but we take help from anybody. We don't give handouts. We try to connect them so they can stand on their own 2 feet. Just want people to be aware. Thank you.
Hello, panel. My name is Chaplain Roger Cornell, and I'm a chaplain with the county, registered with housing, with hospital ministry, with jail and prison ministries. So I circulate a lot. And I'm the guy on the ground responsible probably for what a lot of people call a neighborhood, because I'm out at the camps all the time. I know where most of the camps are, or did know until this 85 person group came in recently, and I know about where half of those camps are. But anyway, I want to touch on a few points that you made. But first of all, I want to offer a solution, because I've got 2 minutes. I'm going to do this real quickly. The solution is, after 8 years of me being on the ground and talking to these people, one-on-one, sitting on buckets, stumps, or whatever, we need a campground. Something legitimate here where we put these people in one place. Running water, maybe basic electricity, that's it. Something the city can approve, the county can approve, and law enforcement will know where these people are camping or where to bring them. We have condemned land. I'm a former broker. We have condemned land. I can appreciate what this gentleman said about that, about trashing the properties and everything. We have an organization, Live Love, from Atlanta here that helped us last year. We picked up 10 truckloads of trash, which only touched the basics out there. There's so much trash, we could have done 10 tractor trailer loads easily. but it's all over the place. And I can show you posters. I've got 20 by 30 posters. I do presentations all over the place. Because we're funded, we're a 501(c), but we're not funded by any organization. It's just by people's hearts, and that's it. I don't ask for monies. So we've functioned for 8 years doing this. But also, I want to speak about, well, they have no water. So a campground would be a solution. Just get water from a faucet, nothing else. Okay? And this would be a coordinated effort for all of us. And we have some good people in this room right here. I didn't expect this. And I thank the police for doing this forum in this manner. So I've been to every forum for 8 years, and it's never been addressed, especially with a specific panel like this, who are experts in all your different areas. Because I'm just a simple person. I consider myself a soldier of God, and that's it. So thank you.
Welcome to go to the back of the line and address the crowd. There's no just one.
No, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done, and really appreciate this effort especially.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm very surprised that there's so many citizens here to be aware of all the services we have in our city, in our county. But if I, as a resident, were to have a weather catastrophe on my block, and we are all without electricity, without water, we're basically homeless. Where would we go in the city of Hickory? Where are the emergency shelters for weather catastrophes?
That would actually be something that would be set up by the Red Cross, and so kind of a different topic. So our emergency management here in Yossi and some of her folks in Catawba County, if it were weather related, for instance, the tornado that we had, there are shelter locations, and I don't have a list of them up here, but there is a process that would be put in place for a certain number of shelters for a weather related catastrophe.
Would we call 211 to find that out?
I was getting ready to say, we are set up with Karen. We talked with her during possible disasters, weather, and she knows to let us know so that we can immediately put those into the 211. We did put the warming stations during the winter, and I know that other cities who've had like emergencies such as parts of the community without water, that they've been able to get that in immediately into the 211 where there's water pickup locations. So, and I know that those centers are not even, until the disaster happens, they're not even, but they do have them on their books.
Okay. Now, who is in charge, let's say, of the armory? If we had a disaster, would that be someplace that people could go, whether the weather is freezing or whatever, or that is not your jurisdiction as county representatives?
That would be the National Guard. And
Yeah.
For shelters for this type of thing, I'm not sure that is available. So that would be the Army or the National Guard.
So we couldn't find out if we could use it at any time locally?
We could check. That'd be something to look into.
Okay.
We do have, in the wintertime, for folks that are homeless, we do have the warming stations, as Jenny mentioned. And the warming stations, the way that works is those stations, it's several churches in the community that have been set up, and they pick up folks from the day shelter, and then folks can walk to those locations. And then they stay there until 10:30 at night, and then they can go over to the Salvation Army, and then they can stay in the Salvation Army in their cafeteria area. They have cots set up. And so there is a process in place when nights are below 30, 32 degrees, and that's on the 211 system. So we do have those warming stations set up and a place that folks can go without having to be the drug testing, those kinds of things. They just come in, and after everyone else is in their quarters at the Salvation Army, then they can go to the...
And that is in our city Salvation Army?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
For the numbers that you gave when you look at the street count, there are typically enough warming stations to accommodate that number, correct?
Yes, we have looked at, when I talked about our point in time count, I talked about housing inventory count. And so according to the housing inventory that we have available for emergency and transitional housing shelters and the vacancies that we have sometimes in those programs, we have not exceeded the amount that we have that we are able to count that are homeless and not have space for them somewhere. And so we haven't looked at creating additional shelters, those kinds of programs to expand our emergency shelter basis in our community, just because the numbers have not supported that need. We do have enough beds at the Salvation Army, along with the other emergency and transitional housing programs, that if folks wanted to come in, that we could find them locations in the emergency or transitional housing programs at this point.
Hi, I'm Tina Stewart.
I'm Jeff Stewart.
We're from a church called A Place to Talk, and one of the reasons we came today, we've got a real heart for helping individuals who are disenfranchised and poor. We have a dream of a tiny house community. We've got property in Brookford, 2 tracts of land.
It's 2 tracts of 17 acres south of Interstate 40 between Center Street and 127.
And so we're just trying to network right now. We're at ground level with this. It would not be a homeless encampment. It would be helping, probably starting out with possibly foster kids who have gotten past the age of being cared for. Also some other possibilities, but we're just trying to connect with people who might want to help us with that. And then the last thing I would say is there is a Facebook page. It's called Benevolence Hickory, started by me, but it's open to anyone for networking, charitable needs and causes in the community, and that includes volunteer opportunities. And we've already got some people on there, and we help Department of Social Services with foster care needs, and it's amazing how quickly those needs get met when we post on there. So just letting you know that that exists.
I would encourage you guys to participate in the Housing Visions meeting. I mentioned that earlier, the second Thursday of each month at 12 noon at the Catawba County United Way. If you have affordable housing initiatives and things that you want to do, that meeting is just about housing and lack of, and affordable housing is a huge need in our area. And I know tiny homes or small homes have been some things that some communities have looked at. And so our agency is actually looking at doing some small homes in the Gastonia area and looking at other areas that we serve that may be some viable options. When you look at housing and the cost of housing, particularly for people with disabilities, people on disability make $750 a month. For a 1-bedroom apartment in Hickory in this area, it's a minimum of $550 usually, including your rent and utilities to live. And so if you have someone that's on a very limited income like those with disabilities, affordable housing is a real obstacle. Even for Section 8, if people are able to get a Section 8 voucher, a lot of folks are having to turn those in because there's no affordable housing in the area that meets the guidelines. There's substandard housing, and so affordable housing is a huge issue that we need to address to be able to house the folks that we currently are working with.
And I guess I just think we ought to remember the strength in having people placed throughout our community because they have the support of those community members. I think that there's been the thought that many times you put folks in one location. However, there is strength in having folks throughout our community so that they do have that network and that the opportunity to have others to influence them.
And I would encourage inclusive housing, several different, not to have clustered housing of different populations of everybody that's poor or living in poverty or everyone that's dealing with a substance abuse or mental health issue. Inclusive housing is very important. If you live around other people who can strengthen your weaknesses, that's a huge asset to the community as a whole.
Okay. My name is Chinyon Vanoy, and I'm a resident of Hickory. I was born and raised. I have a 4-year degree in criminal justice, and I've been having my 501c since 2014, but this year I found out that I inherited some property. I've been owning it for 3 years. My dad, he's been dead, but I found my grandmother's will, so I'm going to start transitional housing. It's called Adrian House. The first one is Adrian House. The second bigger vision is Adrian House Gospel Mission. It's gonna house like men and women, and people that come from prison, they can get in a 1 or 2 year program. It's gonna have a food kitchen in it, it's gonna have volunteers, monitors, and a place for the homeless, a place for residents who bring their checks, and we take our money out, we save their money, then after 6 or 7 months, we'll help them get placement in apartments. And also, it's a chapel. I got this idea from Roanoke Rescue Mission. I've been homeless. Well, I went traveling, so I went to homeless shelters, a lot of homeless shelters. I've been to Dallas Life Foundation. I've been to Salvation Army. But I like to thank Salvation Army of Hickory and the Hickory Police Department for being fair with me. As they see me come up, they didn't kick me, and they helped me along the way, so I appreciate it. Heartfelt thank you. But out of so many opposition I had, I got a good idea for Hickory to help solve the problem. And like I can go back to Roanoke and find out some more information, and then I'll bring it back. But I got some ideas in my head because I lived there for a while. But thank you.
First of all, thank you all for being here. You all are the soul of the community. We can't hear you. Okay. There we go. All right. I'm Kathy Mersinger. I'm a retired teacher. I have taught in many places across the country. And I ended my career here in Caldwell County. And I'm well aware of the students and the families that you deal with all the time. My question deals with, what is the city of Hickory, the county of Catawba, and the state of North Carolina doing to help us with this? There is, being a teacher, I know there's money out there for grants and all kinds of stuff, but where is the help from our elected leaders? Or is there? Thank you for your time and thank you for all you do.
Well, again, there's a lot of help out there, and on the flyer that we have, a lot of this is really a nonprofit. There are organizations out there, and there are just a whole lot of nonprofit organizations. I think, you know, we do work with Catawba County, we work together, but I think, again, it's going to take a collaborative effort throughout our community with both, you know, government and private working together. So, you know, it's a tough issue. We don't have all the solutions, but I think you've heard a lot of different perspectives today. And, you know, again, I think we all kind of have some opinions, but, you know, I think the key to this is with the nonprofit organizations that you have that are working hard every day.
So you think that's the key as opposed to help from local, state?
I guess my question would be specifically what kind of help are you asking?
Okay, well, I won't take up more time, but let's say, for example, the homeless situation and the people that have come here and said the things that they have said, I would think that those are great ideas for us to pick up on. And also, I don't know, I guess I would say, what is the city of Hickory doing to help these people who are in a homeless situation? And is the job for nonprofits or is it for government? And that's not a judgmental thing, I'm just asking a question. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can speak to there's a grant that comes from the federal government by way of the count that Tina spoke about, the homeless count that we just went through the end of January. That goes in, and it goes into a formula, and there's emergency food and shelter money that comes to Catawba County through a formula that they have, and that is administered through the United Way, and those dollars do go out to the soup kitchens, the shelters, I'm trying to think now, soup kitchens, shelters, many of the organizations that feed the homeless, that money is distributed by an independent panel of volunteers. So that is one part of money that it does come from the federal government. Do you want to speak about the housing money, Tina?
Yes, we do have some grant funding that comes into the community on a federal level. We do partnership with the city and the county on several different projects. I know the city is very involved with our housing visions, continuum of care. They are at the table on a regular basis with collaboration. The county, I know, gives money specifically to, they get partners who I work for money to help with serving those who are indigent, and we use some of that money to support housing initiatives and housing programs for folks with mental health and substance use disorders. So I know our city and our county folks, we really try to work together. We constantly are trying to increase that collaboration and work together more and more to increase affordable housing and different things. So there is that collaboration that's currently going that can always get better just with anything. But we are really happy to have our relationships with the county and the city, as well as we are involved with North Carolina Coalition on Homelessness, which is a state organization. Our housing visions feeds into that group, and we work collaboratively with them to see things that are coming down the pipe for new initiatives, things like that, and then for grants to apply for federal and state grants. So those are a couple of things that we're doing.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Nellie Rosales. I'm actually the graduate assistant for the Center for Commercial and Social Entrepreneurship here on campus. And we actually had a hackathon this past 72 hours. And our students came up with two solutions. One of them was a community greenhouse, and it would provide sustainability for the homeless population, along with a role in society. And the other was an app which people of the community could round up, let's say their total charge was $250. The remaining cents could be donated to a nonprofit in the community that would help raise funds for the homeless population. So those are our two ideas that we found most helpful for this initiative. Like she said, the past lady, sorry, it's a community initiative. So our students here at LR, we love to help, and we just wanted to present those ideas to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for today, for hosting this event. I'm Liz Doublebecker. I work at Greater Hickory Cooperative Christian Ministry. I coordinate a ministry called Networks. Networks is an intentional community of folks who come together with individuals and families who are looking to move their lives forward out of what we culturally call poverty. We define poverty differently. We look at it holistically. And so we think that the opposite of poverty is not wealth. It's connectedness. It's value. It's dignity. And it's believing that you have a place in the community that you live. And so I would like to suggest today that this is a matter of a change of mindset and heart set in the way that we see our neighbor. Because those people that we are talking about today, the homeless community, are our neighbors. They may not be geographically within our neighborhood where we live, in our, where we pull our car in the garage, but they are our neighbors. And so we believe in relational community building. So we can give money to nonprofits, and it's incredibly important. And it addresses the continuum of homelessness to this end, which is that place in which folks are ready for transformation. And they are ready for change. But meeting folks along that continuum, meeting people where they are, is incredibly important. And done with mercy and grace and compassion is that piece that not all nonprofits can meet. They're pushed to their limits. We all know this. And it isn't just financial. People come to work sometimes with their whole hearts out. And we need to, as a community, be making sure that our hearts are engaged too. And we do care about people's property, and we do care about accountability, but we also need to make sure that we see each other as a child of God and as a neighbor. Thank you.
I am the student ambassador at Kentucky Valley Community College. I more so just had a comment. I am here just to kind of represent, obviously, we believe that the homeless people need education. And my job as the student ambassador is to meet people where they are and to help them get through the college process, whether it's through enrollment, and then actually tracking them through, their classes and getting them the help they need. So I really just, like I said, wanted to make the comment so that anybody from all of the other organizations, if you have people ready for college, please send them to me. I have a lot of different information that I brought along with me, but we're very eager to help, so.
Please, if you are not through and you have more to talk about, if you have additional information on your group, nonprofit group or organization, please come around and get back in the line. We want to hear from you, especially if you have a solution. When I stand and let you know that it's 2 minutes, but just so everyone will have an opportunity to share, but please get back in line and let us know. Don't feel like it's one bite at the apple. Come back and talk to us. I don't want to interrupt, and I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to talk. But we do want to try to get as many people to have a time with the microphone as they possibly can. So please, if you're not completed your thought, your idea, your comment, please come around and get back in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. First, my name is Cliff Moon, as I know most of you on the panel, and many people here. It is, and I want to thank you first, Chief, for having this event and for allowing the public and the citizens of Hickory to come together for something like this. I got up to speak. I really wasn't going to. I got up to speak because of the lady, Ms. Mercer's question about the city and those kinds of things. It's been my privilege to be both the Habitat Board President and Habitat Board member, and to work through Habitat, a nonprofit, and work that for affordable housing in this area, and to help so many people stay away from the whole difficulties that they get into with homelessness. It's also been my privilege for the last few years to be the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the City of Hickory. And on that committee, I want people to know, one of the things we do on that committee is, in fact, every time we meet monthly, is come together and look at how we can help disperse appropriate funding through the city. Much of it does come from federal funding, community development block grant funding, but it is handled through the city. And what the main focus of that is, of course, is to help people with repairs and stay in housing. As many people here are probably aware, we have one of the oldest housing stocks in the whole state, and this is obviously an issue and a problem. So one of the things, that's just one, and actually also almost all of any number of the nonprofits also go through the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting for fundings that comes from the city. So the city is very active and working hard along with the county and with you folks who are doing such a marvelous job. My question, though, I do have a question, because other than the gentleman who came up after Mr. Van Datt, I wanted to hear, and one other young lady that just spoke a minute ago, I wanted to know if you all might like to address the question that Mr. Luckadoo put in his presentation of how to deal with that problem of the homeless community and the trash and everything like that.
Thank you, Cliff. And that, I think the question really is, when you talk about Tina, you're talking about the folks that are living in an unsheltered environment. That is the toughest question probably today, and that's really why we're here. There is no great answer. It's a combination of answers, and I think it goes back to we have got to, some folks, and Reverend Longfire and I have had this conversation. What we've seen from our perspective is that there are a lot of organizations and opportunities out there for folks who are eager and want to get help, and we're able to help those folks. The tough question is for folks who are living in encampments, and there are a lot of times, as Tina said, you're dealing with mental health, substance abuse issues, You know, they're a lot of times they're panhandling, and they are resistant. You know, many times they don't want to stay in the Salvation Army shelter. You know, many nights I think Rob would tell you there are spaces available to stay in the Salvation Army, and for whatever reason, whether it be rules, you know, we talk to folks all the time, and, you know, there has to be rules, but for whatever reason, we have folks that just, you know, they are resistant to that, and they want to stay in the encampments. And, you know, of course, enforcement is one way that we deal with that, and we are obligated to do that. As police, in my role, I'm obligated to help Tommy as best I can. As a property owner, you know, what we would say is, you know, we have got to, as quickly as possible, you know, if you see those kinds of things, you know, call us and kind of get those things cleaned up. I think as police, we have a stereotype with some that, you know, we are not always, we're going to come there and it's always enforcement. Enforcement is one tool. As you heard me say earlier, our goal ultimately is to try to get this person out of homelessness. You know, our goal is to solve the problem. You know, sometimes enforcement is the answer to that, but many times is we can intervene and get somebody connected to services. So it's a collaborative effort. There's not an easy answer to that. I think many cities, I go to chiefs conferences and I talk to other chiefs of metro areas, and they're all dealing with this issue virtually everywhere. And so, you know, we're working on it, but I think we've got to work together. Property owners have to check their properties and call us immediately and keep their properties cleaned off so it's not attractive. As citizens, we have to really stop giving things, handing things out the window. If we're doing those kinds of things, we're taking things directly out to an encampment, then we're not giving that person an opportunity. You know, you're just helping that person be homeless another day. You're not helping them get connected with services. So I think that's the collaborative answer to that. That's the best answer that I can come up with. And so I'll turn it over to some of my colleagues to see if they have anything to add.
Well, Cliff, you know, as Chief alluded to, we're not the only city dealing with this. You know, we're probably any medium or large size city in the United States deal with this to some extent. I read an article last Friday about San Diego. They just hauled 250 tons of trash out of an urban campground. I may have taken a psychology class as a freshman in college. I don't remember. I've read a bit about the psychology of homelessness. I've read a bit about the psychology of addiction. But I've never read an article about the psychology of living in squalor, I guess is how I put it. A couple of months ago, there was a campsite popped up that I pass every day. It initially looked like they had some new tents, new sleeping bags. It's probably 20, 30 feet off the road. You can see it very plainly. And it really puzzled me that over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, it turned into a trash dump. And I know there's probably some mental illness involved in that. I would love to see some studies about that particular issue of homelessness. But I think we've got to, you know, see what we can learn about that. And I know there's been some encouragement to not enable homelessness by giving tents and sleeping bags and things like that. But if people are going to do that, maybe we need to get trash bags too. Tell them to set them beside the road. I've got 8 dumpsters up at my place, you know. But I'd like to learn more about that particular thing.
I'd like to add to that just a little bit. One of the things that we are blessed to be in a community that is so giving and so caring. We have lots of folks that want to help people in a lot of different ways, and you know, there's a fine line between enabling and keeping somebody warm and dry in bad weather. And so, you know, that different people's lines are at different places where that enabling begins. But one of the things that we need to do, we do a really good job of taking care of people where they're at. We have programs, transitional housing programs, emergency shelters. We do great taking care of those people while we have them. What we need to work on is the continuum to move people from different places, from where they are in their homeless situations to where they are in transitional, emergency, to permanent housing. You know, one of the things that we struggle with is funding to pay for those resources for like case management. That's a service that there's no funding for anywhere. And so that is a major resource to have people, to track people, to move people, and to go out and do some of that outreach in those communities. I know Roger goes out and he knows where a lot of those communities are. But to have funding for a case manager who's professionally trained to deal with mental health and substance use disorders and those kinds of things, and know the resources to be able to track that person and keep them moving, and some accountability for the trash, those kinds of things, that's a huge undertaking and a huge effort. And funding to help support case management type positions could probably help with that significantly. But I know a lot of the nonprofit agencies that we have, and even partners with the limited funding that we have, it doesn't usually cover case management or that ongoing maintenance kinds of services that a lot of those folks need that are dealing with the social determinants of health, whether it's mental health, housing, substance use. So I think some of those issues are related to funding, which most issues are, and that's something that I would like to see in our community that would really, I think, make a dent to connect some of the efforts that we have right now that are working really well.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to give you for the problem, but I've been with the Army 6 years, and it's, you've got kind of almost a community of people that they just choose to live this way. And they live in tents, and that's how they live. I know some that have lived in tents in this area ever since I've been at the Salvation Army. So it's a mindset that they have. It's a group of them. They relate, and that's another thing that you've got to overcome is just that mindset of this is the way I'm going to live. This is the way I want to live. They get their meals free every day. They get showers, but they choose to live this way. So that's another issue.
I agree. I think we have to divide the folks that are living like this by choice and the ones that really want to get out of this and are asking for that help. And we clearly make sure that we're helping those that want to move from that homeless position.
And here, when we talk about stopping from somebody from being homeless, I'm trying to take you out of your situation, out of your tent. The folk got to want to stop being homeless. You got to want to get somewhere nice. You got to want a clean place. You got to want a place. And so we can't do everything for them, you know. I don't want to help anybody no more than they want to be helped. You know, so now, if you're complacent in the woods, you know, I'll move on to the next person. Some folks they like how they are where they are. I had a gentleman one time came to ask if somebody brought him, and he was sleeping in the woods for some time in the tent. And they said, we thought this would be a good program. We walked around the program. We told him it would be structured. You're not able to do whatever. You can't come and go as you please. And he whispered, he pulled the counselor to the side, whispered. And I said, what did he say? She said, he wants to know whether or not he can still meet with his friends at the soup kitchen. Certainly we'll work that out. But then he whispered to her again, he said, I don't think I want this. Yeah. Some people want to stay where they're at. So, and far be it from us to go against where they want to be as far as the trash is concerned. I'm just dropping the trash bags off at this. I heard a gentleman say, we cleaned up all the trash. I would expect them to clean up their own trash. You know, drop the trash bags there and whatnot. But how much are you willing to come? Because if you clean it up for them today, what happens next month? They're looking for you to come back and clean it up again. So, as far as I'm concerned, I would let them clean it up. But see how bad you want to stay out the trash. See how bad you want to, and the picture that is a mindset, a frame of mind. It was mentioned about mental health issues, mental health disorders that many of these people have. And some folks just, this is where my mind is, this is where I want to be, this is where I'm content. And long as you're giving me something. And then when we talk about Salvation Army and other places, some people don't want to be held accountable. If I go to the Salvation Army, I can't do what I want to do. If I want to drink alcohol, if I go to Exodus, I can't do it. But there's some things that I want to do that I can't do that. But I can do it in the woods. And so I go to the woods.
Ma'am?
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jeannie Yang, and I'd like to address or talk a little bit about preventative measures. Given the growth of Hickory, Charlotte, Morganton, I worry about gentrification happening in our county in the near future. What can organizations or our government do to ensure that families who are already struggling to pay rent and hold steady jobs don't end up on the streets?
I feel like I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry. I feel like to some of that extent, we have to have affordable housing and it has to be inclusive housing. You know, housing authorities with project-based housing is great, but to cluster people with the same kind of people is not conducive to those folks moving in and out of different social, economic levels. And so I feel like that if we can build some more inclusive housing that is affordable, that'll help that. The best way to end homelessness is to prevent it, keep people from going in that situation. I don't think we've figured that out yet. There's a whole lot of studies being done about the social determinants of health and how, you know, housing situations and a person's health, their environment, those kinds of things all contribute to their housing and their well-being overall. And so I think there's a little bit of a shift in looking for funding and looking at different housing in different ways and how to keep people from going into those situations. So I think that we need to continue to look and explore those options. But I think a lot of it is we've got to stop clustering people. We have to be very inclusive and we have to have affordable housing. The housing market's going up and minimum wage is not going up. Disability wages are not going up and we have a lot of people that are living in poverty. And so I think that's part of something that we need to be looking at, and which is a small piece to the big puzzle.
I think you're correct. We do need wraparound services for folks that are working and aren't able to make that monthly, like childcare, affordable childcare. We need to look at services. There's folks taking care of their aging parents. There's we need to look at those items, not just for the homeless, but for the folks who are working who might be the next person who will be homeless. You're correct.
And I will add too, I know some of our funding that we have comes from HUD, and some of the funding that is directed towards housing and homelessness through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, is focused on chronic homelessness. And so they don't address the folks that are just becoming homeless. And so that's a big thing that we need to look at, to advocate for is, you know, it's great that we want to help the folks that are chronically homeless. There's a lot of those folks that we've been talking about that have been in the woods for a long time. But what about that family who loses their house in a fire, or they lost a job, or their vehicle stopped working so they can't get to work? And so you've got a lot of those folks that we don't want them going into the homeless system. We've got to find a way to keep them on their feet. And some of the funding that is coming down is strictly just for those folks that, you know, we don't want to leave people a year in homelessness before we can help them. So looking at those type of programs too, and do some advocacy through the legislature and those kinds of things are very important as well.
Hi, my name is Michelle Morgan, and I work at Women's Resource Center, so I'm one of these nonprofits that helps people, and I see every day what people are going through as far as trying to find affordable housing and having to work with homeless women as well. I would suggest a central agency that is county-wide, that oversees all of these wonderful nonprofits. Office of Homeless Services, for example. That way that they can help connect the people that need to find the resources in our community. And there's one agency overseeing it all. And as far as what you were saying about HUD, I've been doing a little research on that as well, and they are starting to turn the tables on rapid rehousing. And as a matter of fact, in Philadelphia, they've been working on this program where if they can get people out of homelessness right when it happens, like you said, right when something bad happens, the longer they're in the system, the longer they get there, and the more they can become accustomed to living in the group housing, out in the tents and things like that. And if we can get them out of homelessness right off the bat, working with all of our local agencies, helping to get them into low-income housing, helping to have incentives to lower the rent so these people can at least get back on their feet, and work with also people that are helping them through workforce development and maybe helping teach them a trade so they can sustain their rent and be off the streets.
Or you raise an interesting point about coordinating services. I sat through a conference call a couple of years ago put on by Harvard University regarding public education. And their point was that there are tons of resources for after-school programs, reading programs, this, that, and the other. There may be 5 or 10 reading programs after school in a given community, but none of them are coordinating with each other. And their point was that all these disparate efforts while trying to do the same thing resulted in a very, very, very inefficient use of resources. And they have actually come up with a program for education to where they have one central group that got all these different resources together and said, okay, you guys do specialize in this part, you guys specialize in that part. And the same number of resources carried the programs much, much farther by coordinating. And there was a comment in that call I was on about maybe applying that same principle to other public services. So that may be a very good thing to think about.
Hello, my name is Darius Jackson. I've had friends that were homeless, and I spoke to them, and I live around the Highland Springs Road area, and they've said that they can't get over to LR Boulevard sometimes. They were staying in abandoned buildings. So my question is, what's the transportation? Is there somewhere they can call and say, I need to get this to Salvation Army, or is it possible we can put another Salvation Army in some other shelter on that area of town? There is quite a bit of difference. If you don't have that, get up and walk, you don't get there. Not everybody able to do that.
The public transportation runs out there, don't they?
It's not free, yeah, they got to be able to pay for it.
Yeah. And they don't have the funds to pay for it?
Yeah.
Two little Caesars.
Yeah. All I can say is to call our crisis help center and explain what your problem is, and we'll help. But we don't have any intentions of opening another Army shelter down that way.
Well, I guess I want to understand, are you talking about transportation to go to eat there, or transportation to stay?
Or to stay. Like when night times come, they're trying to walk there, they're not going to make it there in time sometimes.
So they want to remain in the woods out of the Springs Road area?
Yes, or we're staying in abandoned buildings, which I don't know, which you're running, looks like they were staying in abandoned buildings.
So they do transportation to come and eat there and then go back?
Yeah. I don't know that we could offer that service to come and get you to eat and come back. Definitely to come up and get into the shelter. We would do that. We can do that. But,
It's not a business work, you're saying.
Sir? My name is Will Posey. I'm one of the pastors at the First Methodist in Hickory, here just across the street. This panel, by the way, this community who's here today, this is why I'm really glad and grateful to live in Hickory, and I'm proud of y'all and what our community he does. Several weeks ago, I went to the grocery store to get dinner for my wife and I was very proud of myself, and I bought a pork tenderloin and a bag of salad and some rolls to come home and cook for dinner. And I felt really good about making that decision for Leah and for us. And when I came home, she already had chicken that was marinated and ready to go in the oven, and salad that she had cut up, and bread that she had prepared herself. So it's a silly story to get around to saying, I don't know about anybody else, but I don't have a very good track record of making decisions about other people's lives for them. One of the things that I'm so grateful for about some of these agencies that y'all represent, and others who have spoken, I'm familiar some with Liz talking about networks, and folks who have talked about Habitat for Humanity and the ways that in networks, a person who is moving out of poverty as the champion, like they're the center, the central decision maker. And in Habitat, the person who is building the home is central to that decision-making process. And so I wonder, what are the ways in which our homeless neighbors, about whom we're talking, can have a more central role in the conversation and these sorts of forums that we're having? I'm grateful. I think this is great. So my suggestion and my wondering is, what are ways in this forum, and then at the sorts of meetings that you mentioned on the second Thursday at noon at United Way, how can our homeless neighbors have a more central role in that and exercise their own agency in these decision-making processes?
We need to have homeless representation on that continuum of care, the housing visions. It's actually it's a requirement for us to have homeless input. And so we try to find folks that can come, and we've had a few off and on, but to have someone consistent has been a struggle. We are hopefully having a new person come in pretty soon. So that's an open meeting to anybody, regardless of if they're homeless or they're the president, whoever is open to that meeting. And so that's one way that we try to get that input into some of the planning that we do. There's also, the consolidated plannings that I think Worcester Piedmont Council of Government does with transportation and housing. There's lots of ways to do that. We try to post things where folks are going to be, like at the soup kitchens and the day shelters. I think they do a pretty decent job of trying to get that information out there to people. But you're absolutely right, people do need to have say about their own lives.
And we've also had forums during the Homeless Awareness Week that we have had a panel with various homeless folks, if we can get them to come in and share and give ideas to the group. Also, the group that I talked about, the Federal Emergency Food and Shelter, we're required to have a homeless person on that committee as well.
My name is Sarah Boudreau. I'm a food stamp caseworker for Catawba County Social Services. Actually, the first part I was going to say kind of just echoes what the minister said in asking if there's actually any homeless people here today. And suggest that we have another forum where we invite them to bring them here because transportation is an issue, and ask them if there's only approximately 50 unsheltered homeless and if there's vacancies in the shelters and programs, what is discouraging people from utilizing the shelters and resources, and how can we overcome those challenges for homeless people to utilize the resources available? Challenges like transportation, mental illness, and intellectual disabilities. It seems absurd to me to suggest that someone who chooses to live without shelter or live in squalor doesn't have psychological issues of some kind, be it mental illness, depression, anxiety, intellectual disabilities. And maybe if the homeless issue discourages new businesses from coming here, then the city or county should start looking at it as a beautification issue and to put beautification funds towards it.
One thing I'll say real quick is at the police department, I know just to kind of add to what Tina says, what we have found with folks, what I'm talking about is folks that we interact with as police, which is, not most of the 300 or so folks that Tina's talking about. I think as police, obviously we interact more so with folks,
situation that are out on the street. And we do talk with them quite a bit, and we've tried to start over the last year kind of keeping some data. What we found is a lot of that group, they're very different. You can't just say all homeless people are alike or the same. Each one has a different story. Just like what Brad said, some are just resistant, and that's where they want to be. They're going to live in the woods, and that's it.
And I hear a lot of those stories when they come in to apply, and I hear about some of the challenges that they face in seeking and receiving services.
And what I was going to say is, we see a lot of new folks, and we see folks that kind of come and go, and just keeping track. So of the folks that we've encountered, 56% of them are from the Hickory-Catawba County area. The rest are not. And so we have a very transient population. We hear from folks a lot of times that say, well, how did you get to Hickory? Well, I hear that Hickory takes good care of our homeless folks. And we talk to folks that say, well, I came from Asheville because, I hear that Hickory takes such good care of us. And we actually hear these things. I know Captain Sight got out with some folks the other day, and they were here from Connecticut. And so, it's a really tough thing. We see a lot of different folks, and, some are the same folks that we've dealt with over and over and over for a couple of years, and other folks are just here for a short period of time. So it's a really difficult issue, especially when we talk about, those 50 or 60 or so that are living on the streets.
And the major barriers are substance abuse and mental health for those that are chronically homeless. Our mental health system is not the greatest, and I say that comes from behavioral health. It's not. Our funding continues to get cut. The state dollars and the dollars to support programs or special initiatives in our community that we have a little more flexibility with, those dollars continue to get cut. Medicaid expansion would be a great thing here in North Carolina, but I don't want to get too political here, but that would be great. So there are a lot of barriers, and the people that are dealing with mental health and substance abuse that are out there, I struggle with saying it's a choice, because it is a choice to use or those kinds of things. But a lot of those folks that have mental health issues, that's not a choice to live. It's what they're able to do based on what other things are going on with them. The folks with substance use disorder, our community is, the opioid use and substance abuse right now in the community is just amazing, and it's not with just the homeless folks. My nephew passed away last year from substance abuse, and he was far from homeless. So I think there are some other things that drive those choices, that when we say it's a choice, that it's the choice based on other things that are going on right now, and that's really hard to overcome. So those barriers are very difficult to deal with.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Martin. I work at Greater Hickory Cooperative Christian Ministry, and I really have a comment and a question. My comment is, I hope that no one truly believes that people that are homeless want to be homeless, that they want to live in squalor and they don't want to take care of their families or have a job or work in the community or have dignity. I think the lack of action on someone's part when they're homeless doesn't mean they want to stay that way. I think there's a feeling of what to do and how do I change this. And so, again, I don't think people choose this. My second is the question, and that's, Tina mentioned that 50 people were homeless or identified as homeless on that point in time count, and 23 of those people had mental health issues and 23 had substance abuse issues. And I'm so grateful for the transitional housing that the Salvation Army provides, that Exodus House provides, but if you have to blow clean to get in, then what do we do with those 23 people? Is there any plans for transitional housing for people that are still fighting substance abuse? Thank you.
We are constantly looking for, there's a thing called Housing First, which, and that's a really big thing right now, but we struggle with that right now in our community because our housing stock is not that ample. And so Housing First means that you put somebody in permanent supportive housing, not emergency or transitional, but you put someone in permanent housing where they don't have to leave, and it's not dependent on their services, it's not dependent on their sobriety or their record of being clean from drugs, their mental health issue, regardless of what's going on. You put them in housing and you help support them with wraparound services in their housing. And that's been a huge success in a lot of communities. The issue is, in our area, we don't have the housing stock to do that, because do you want someone coming into your property that is currently using, that you know is using? I wouldn't want that as a landlord. I wouldn't want somebody who's going to trash my place. And so having the wraparound services to support that person in that housing first is very important as well. Because if you don't have that accountability, or that someone coming through to check and see if things are not being torn up, or making sure people are making their mental health or substance use appointments, that makes housing first very difficult. But there is that housing first initiative, and we'd like to be able to do some of that. It's just really hard to find landlords that are willing to do that. And also the wraparound supports are very hard to do. We do have a Shelter Plus Care grant that comes through our HUD funding, and it's along the basis of the housing first. We take people that are chronically homeless and put them in housing, and Christian Ministry, Greater Hickory Cooperative Christian Ministries actually does our case management for that program right now. And so without those supports from that case management, those folks would flop in housing quickly, and their landlords would kick them out very quickly. But to have some of that accountability and collaboration with the case manager really helps that housing first initiative be successful.
We also have adult rehabilitation centers for men and women. And if someone wants to get sober, we'll get them down there and get them in the program. It's free. It's a 6-month program run by the Army. And our captain can get them in. They've got to check themselves in and be willing to get in the program.
I'm Tim Lentz. I'm the clinical director for Catawba Valley Behavioral Health Care. We see most of the people that have substance use issues and mental health issues in Catawba County. I guess what I want to say as a comment related to, it really needs to be a housing continuum. So I've heard you say that providing for and doing for is not the answer. But I think that in the beginning, if somebody is all they've got is a place to sleep, then that's a good place to start. We have people who walk in our center every day and can't complete the paperwork or can't complete it accurately because they don't know where they're going to sleep or where they're going to eat. And it's not the fact that they can't get services, because as broke as our system is for mental health and substance use, people who don't have insurance can get free treatment. Does everybody know that? Free treatment. So it's not just an issue of they're homeless and they don't want to get treatment, or that they don't know where to go or where to start. They can walk in and get services, but if they don't know where they're going to eat or where they're going to rest their head or where their kids are going to sleep that night, it really kind of debunks and kind of sets forward that issue of they can't actively be in recovery or start that process if what they've got going on is not addressed. And we can start the paperwork and we can get them in there, but how valuable is that going to be to a person if we can sit there and tell them how to fix things or how to work through and fix their issues, but how much of that are they going to absorb if they don't know where they're going to sleep or where they're going to eat? So I really think that it has to be a continuum, that it is this start where it is transitional housing, where kind of how it builds up, because everything that we do in life is a process. We just don't get on a bike and ride down the road. We have to fall sometimes, and we have to practice that. So if we really want people to not be homeless, then it has to be a continuum. Some people may go in at level 3, some people may go in at 5, but there's a lot of people who need level 1, where they need a safe place to sleep, rest their head, know that they're going to have a meal so that they can focus on getting help. That's all. Thank you.
In one of our continuum meetings recently, one of the workers said one of my clients had a voucher and it ran out because they could not find affordable housing that would take the voucher. So
And if we don't have what everybody needs in our community, then it's a social issue. It's not a mental health issue or a substance use issue. It's a social issue. Because we don't have the means as a community or as a society to support those people where they're at. We talk about every day that we meet people where they're at. Well, we don't meet people where they're at if we can't give them what they need.
I'd like to echo that. I'm Bill Gerard, retired United Methodist pastor. But as far as the homeless go, I'm a bus driver. I volunteer at our warming station at St. Luke's United Methodist Church, and I go and pick them up where they are and bring them to St. Luke's so they can have a meal, a warm place to stay until they can go to the shelter. And so these folks have their garbage bags full of stuff. They're limping, having a hard time walking, some of them. But they still are a community. They're people. They're real people. They're somebody's brother, somebody's son, somebody in our family that could be there, either through substance abuse or just something bad happens to them. So when they come over and they're getting a hot meal, I go over and I kind of talk to them. There's Elaine there. She's has some physical disability, and she has disability. But she says, I don't have enough money to get a house. My disability check was cut. She didn't tell me why. And I'm up to $750 now. And I said, well, yeah, that's okay. But I need enough to pay the deposit and get a place. Okay, Elaine, go over to CCM. I understand they'll help you over there to figure all that out. And I think his name was Eric. And Eric had worked in factories, furniture factories here in Hickory. He worked for a long time, had a steady job for a long time. Then he had a family crisis. His family broke up. He went into depression. And he's skilled, but I just can't get a job. He's been 3 years homeless. There may be other issues, but that was his story. One guy said, and on the bus they'll talk to one another and they say, yeah, we're responsible for what's happening. We're addicted and we need to get treatment. But somehow there needs to be a place they can go where somebody says to them, you're important, you matter, and I know there are places here among our nonprofits, but a place that they can go and say, give them hope. We're going to help you through this, where you don't have to be on the street. So let's do it.
Hey, my name is Adrian. I'm actually a resident of Asheville, born and raised in Hickory, but I've lived in Asheville for 10 years, and I'm a core team member of Feel of Asheville. And so the big thing that I want to echo from the gentleman that just spoke was the two words, you matter, and that's what we focus on with people, and we try to step away from the us and them aspect, and go along with what you said about meeting people where they are. And so we really try to, we have a group called Homeless Voice, and that came out of community forums where people are talking about homelessness, and people on the panel and people in the audience are not actually homeless or formerly homeless. And so we wanted to provide a space for people who live on the street and live in camps and live this life to actually talk about what they need. And so one of the things is transportation, which has been mentioned before. And one thing that we do is if people are engaged in these meetings 3 times a month, then we provide them with a monthly bus pass, and that provides access to all the resources that they may need. And so people, can come and be a part of this, and they may not have to struggle with trying to find a way to get to and from meals or to and from shelter, whether it's abandoned buildings or whatever. So real quick, another thing I wanted to touch on was the trash issue. There's 2 organizations in Asheville called Greenworks and Riverlink, and they do river cleanup and city property cleanup. And so they've come to us, to our Homeless Voice meeting and ask, how can we change the face of homelessness? Because like you were saying, not all homeless people are the same. And so not all homeless people who live in tents will trash the space. And so what we've done is collaborated with them and some of our homeless folks actually go have work days with these organizations and collectively clean the spaces. So I don't really have a question, I just wanted to throw that out there, some small options, because transportation is very important. And if people are kind of forced into living in the woods, then, you know, there's ways to keep it clean with the people that are wanting to do so.
Well, she took part of my question, but she is my daughter, so I guess I'll I'm Mike Sigmund. I'm just a guy. We go to church across the street at St. Andrews, and our men's group is sort of adopted as part of our ministry. Roger Cornett's organization, we provided some product for his connections with the homeless folks. But basically, what I did glean from some of the first conversations that I heard here was the trash issue. And being a business owner in a previous life, I can identify with, you know, how you can spoil a situation of you know, bringing new business in or possibly just the business that's already here. So my question is, I guess, and it's more, I guess, addressed to the chief, is there any, what's the word I'm looking for? When you come in on a camp like that and it has been trashed, is there any consequences for the folks there? And if so, I know it was mentioned, okay, if we provide trash bags, if they'll clean it up, you know, it's not up to a business owner to go pick it up, you know, so how would that get handled? I guess that's my question.
Well, again, and a lot of the properties that we deal with, you know, we try our best. We have a lot of wooded area in Southeast Hickory especially. And I guess the consequences, I mean, the charge, and, you know, on one end of the spectrum is there is a trespassing charge. I mean, we are to the point where we enforce trespassing. We have to, but getting in there, a lot of the encampments that we deal with, you know, there's such a large amount of trash, it's not, you know, it wouldn't be safe, a lot of the things that we deal with. I mean, you would need heavy equipment to clean some of these places out. And so we're working on some things right now with several different property owners, trying to get that. But again, you know, that's the real question. How do you hold, you know, this one or two people that are responsible for, you know, truckloads of trash that's piled up? And a lot of times with us, you know, when do we notice this? We notice this, you know, in the fall when the leaves fall off. You know, because a lot of these are kind of deep in the wood encampments and on large tracts of land. And then, you know, for us, it becomes much more visible in the fall and winter. And again, a lot of times it's to the point where it can't be cleaned up. It can't be cleaned up by human hands. It has to be cleaned up with heavy equipment. And it's very expensive. And so that's where, you know, we're right in the middle of this issue, you know, trying to, you know, we have to a certain extent hold the property owner accountable if it's on their property. And sometimes it's thousands of dollars. So they're kind of victimized with this. Tough situation. I don't have a great answer for you.
And just to expand on what Steve said, I mean, as a property owner, it is ultimately my responsibility to condition my property no matter how I got there. And if it violates code, I'm going to get a code enforcement letter. And it's up to me to clean it up. And I guess ultimately it has to be that way. It has to be the property owner.
Just as a quick follow-up, how often would it be necessary to go into those camps as an officer? Do they go in as needed, or is it?
Well, again, then you're talking about such a large area and you know, staffing and you know, in reality, I mean, we've got a lot of other things to deal with. And I mean, percentage-wise, you know, these types of calls are really a small percentage of, you know, it's an issue that we talk about a lot, and it's a big problem when you look at, you know, both the police end and the code enforcement end. But, you know, again, a lot of times it gets to the point that you're talking about woods that are very thick, and a lot of it happens over the summertime areas. And I mean, sometimes we have tracts of land in 30 and 40 acres, you know, and just, you know, you can't drive by and see it. And it's just nothing that we don't have the staff to have an officer walk through the property each and every day. So it's, you know, that's where it comes back to that collaboration between property owners, community, checking properties. You know, some of the properties we kind of have to get cleared off and kind of get back to a good starting point and go from here.
Thank you.
Karen Lowe, I just came back to say thank you. I stand here because some of y'all have mentored me, you continue to mentor me, you've changed the lives around, and that inspires me. What I want to say is what we need to do, or a solution is, I appreciate you guys being up there, and I sit on panels myself, but we need to get some of the homeless people resources should borrow about the homeless people over here, because we're talking about them and we keep having conversations where they're not involved. The other thing is we need to start hiring them and putting them on panels and giving them speaker fees and make a model out of it that you can carry around in other cities that will pay for that also, or maybe write grants toward that. And my phone. It won't cut off, I'm going to do one, but I think it is. No excuse. So if we can do things like that, we empower them in ways to do that. Hire them to clean up the properties. You know what I'm saying? Get some of them to clean them up. Some of the people that have organizations. If you put in your budgets where you can hire maybe one of the homeless people and give them an actual decent paying job, we got to change some of the words we're using. We keep saying affordable. There are things that I can afford, but don't mean that they're decent. Some of the houses out there, that's what they can afford. It don't mean that they're decent. We got to continue to work together and talk together as a community, not let the conversation just end, or when something gets on everybody, we all come together and say, okay, we're gonna talk about this again. We've had some solutions, now we gotta put forth some ideas. And be strong about the ideas we're putting forth. Yes, we have to hold people accountable. And there are people, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. So we're gonna be okay with that. But we know people that need to get out and want to get out. We need to have a place for them to go that's decent, that they can get the long-term support that they need. We've got plenty of models here of things that work. So we need to support those things that are working. The things that aren't working, we don't need to keep talking about them because they ain't working, and we need to let that go. Whether it's mental health or anything, when somebody's hungry, they ain't sitting there talking about whether they got mental health or drug problems. You can't turn your stomach out and say, oh yeah, I'm going to the food stamp place. I'm going to set it for 2 weeks from now when I get something to eat, and I'm going to eat. People gonna do what they gonna do, and we gotta let everyone have a seat at the table. If people choose to give to people, they gotta deal with that in their conscience. And if they choose not to, they got to be okay with that in their conscience too. But we as a community have to learn to be a community. We got to have more diversity in every area. Not everybody feels welcome everywhere they go. Hickory is a great model of how diversity can work. But that's not everywhere. So we need people on the outside coming in and looking at what Hickory is doing as far as diversity and working with people. And we need to start putting that model out there for other people to see and welcoming people to come to our city and see what we're doing right instead of what everybody else is doing wrong.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Reverend Baker. And first of all, our name is now on the brochure for a day shelter. And we do some heavy lifting down there, so I think that we should be put on the brochure. And then another thing, I work with the Rapid Rehousing Initiative. Last year when they funded the money, the government funded, they funded the money, and I can say I had 45 people that were placed in a home. They paid a deposit, first month's rent, and this year they added to that utility. So you'd be surprised at what homeless people will do if given the chance. And this year, since it's been, since we've gotten this money, I got over 15 people in housing. And I haven't seen anybody come back. So I'm thanking the Lord and praising the Lord about that. That's all I have.
If you have on the flyer, if you need to get an organization, if you have an organization that you need to get on the flyer and have Crystal Dieter stand up, she is the designer and updater of our flyers, so just see her and she can get you fixed up. Okay, thank you.
Hi, y'all. I'm Mitzi Gelman with Habitat for Humanity, and I'm honored to have heard our name so many times, but I just felt like it would be remiss of me not to come up and say that Habitat is not the answer for homelessness. We'd love to be, but honestly, if Jenny were to come to me right now and make an application for housing, it'd be 2 years before she could get into a house. We put people through intensive screening, they go through classes, they go through budgeting, then they have to come build their house. So we would love to be the answer for homelessness, but we're not. We're like about 6 levels up from homelessness. And what we need, and the reason I came up was to echo again the comment that someone made about the need for the continuum of housing. And there truly is that need for that. From the very beginning, from homelessness, from Salvation Army all the way through. One of the things we've had an experience with recently is with a family who, they weren't homeless, but they lived in a really dire situation. It was so dire that we felt like they had to be moved out of where they were while we were waiting for a home to be built. And just with a mere $150 a month, on top of what they were already paying for a trailer on Cool Park Road, they were able to live in a decent apartment. But before they could do that, they had to have money to pay for the key to go look at the apartment. That was $10. They had to make an application fee. They had to pay for a credit check. There's all these different barriers that we aren't even aware of that are there that prevent people from moving into some place that's decent and therefore prevents them from being homeless. So I think as a community, we all have to take the time to educate ourselves, to be aware of all the different things that keep people from living in some place that's decent, and therefore keeps them from being productive employees, keeps their kids from being good students, and moves our entire community forward. Thank you.
What I just said, we did hear at one of our continuums the need for deposits. So with that, the group took it back and they were able to make a change and work with one of the nonprofits so that we could open that up. So I think what we're hearing today is that if the need, and we understand the need, there's people willing to make changes to make things happen for these people that really want to get into a better situation. And with that working together, it is making it a better place. And
I want to thank all of our panelists who were up here today for a valuable treat. Everybody who's here today, that if you really feel a concern and a heart for homelessness, please get involved. Get involved with one of the group's organizations that's up here. Contact your local representatives, whether it's from a county level or a city level or state level. Talk to them about what you'd like to see done. Get involved with some of the organizations that you've heard speak at the microphone today. Media likes to have a real quick bullet point, unfortunately. We like to tweet stuff out. We like to kind of wrap things up and have it all in a nice, neat little package. So we're going to do that before we wrap up today. We're going to get all these folks up here to give us one message that they'd like to you to take home with them. Yes, Chris. Right. Right. So where do we go from here? I think that's a great idea, and we'll ask people who are in the audience today to think about hosting the next one, to think about maybe one of those groups of nonprofit organizations talking to people and getting them lined up and getting the transportation and getting the homeless people here and getting this group together again, maybe doing it in a different hour, all those types of things. But as of right now, there's no plans for that. We're going to kind of put that out to the audience and everyone who's here today. No plans for that as of yet. But great idea. We need to follow this up. And that's going to be up to you. And you. And you. And even you. I see you guys. It's going to be up to you to try to put this together and follow this up. So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and get a real quick wrap-up of all the people on the panel today, and it's something to take with you. So I'm going to ask all the panel, what do you want people to take home with you today? What thought, what idea, and what do you want them to leave this forum with? And we started up on this end when we started, so we're going to go back this way. Very briefly, what do you want people to know about today, your organization or homelessness in our area, and make it in a tweet. Make it a very few characters, something that people can carry home with them. Jenny Cotton.
Thank you. I believe we see from this meeting today that this is a great community. We have a lot to build upon, and we have a lot of folks who care and are willing to go that extra mile, and I'm happy to be part of this.
Reverend Longcroft.
There's a need for landlords and employees to work in collaboration with those in housing.
Judge Shear.
It's a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted response, and as Mr. Rowe
Rowe just said, this is not something you can tweet out. There's no one bullet point that will solve the problem. Law enforcement can't solve the problem, the court system can't solve the problem. It's going to require a collaborative effort, and hopefully this is simply a beginning and not the end.
I would like to see us as a community to work through the agencies that are on our flyer, that you've heard from today, that you've heard get up and speak. And, you know, rather than, you know, maybe giving money to someone where you don't know where that money's going, work through our local nonprofits because they are the experts, and our goal should be to get folks in wraparound services.
If you want to get involved in with the homeless problem, come out to the Salvation Army Shelter of Hope and volunteer. There's tons of volunteer opportunities. We cook 2 meals a day, 7 days a week. We need help, and spend time with them, with the homeless, and you'll get your eyes will get open.
Judge Cherry said just about everything I was going to say, but I would add, you know, in that long, complicated equation, personal responsibility has to be part of it.
In the words of my friend Austin Pierce, relationships. Relationships are about everything. Relationships with the people that we work with, that we collaborate with, relationships with the folks that are homeless. Get to know the people that you're helping. Get to know the people that you work with to make that happen. So relationships, that's the main key.
I'd like you to do one favor for me, please, before you leave. Some of these folks will be available to talk with you afterwards. Some of them need to get home. It's dinner time. But they'll be glad to give you contact information. So work with us. I want you to do it. Tina, just made me think of something. If you don't know the person to your right, please turn to the person to your right and introduce yourself.